Well, you ever have one of those projects where everything that could go wrong does go wrong? I guess it's time for another DIYary. This one's about the toilet. Let me see if I can catch you up. So, the problem actually started with the bathtub. This is probably 6 months ago in the midst of the pandemic, and we realized that the overflow was leaking, and we had water coming down here, dripping down and hitting the ground. So we came up with a little solution. It turns out that behind all of this that you normally see, and actually it's a little dirty, so forgive me, but behind the tub itself is a gasket. It's actually a tapered gasket, and it connects between the bathtub itself and the pipe for the drain for the overflow here. Well, that gasket basically will get hard over the years and eventually just disintegrate, and that I think is what happened. Well, that I know is what happened because I've actually looked up from below. So what we did a few months back, I turned the overflow upside down and I put a piece of rubber gasket material in behind it just so that if we happen to overflow a little bit, at least it had a chance of going down the drain. But it kept leaking water. And so probably a week and a half ago, well, actually go back maybe a couple of months, started noticing a bubble in the bathroom ceiling down below. This bathroom and the one downstairs line up. And noticed a bubble in the ceiling and assumed what it was the water coming from the overflow and making a giant bubble in the ceiling. Here's a picture for you. So eventually that bubble got bigger and bigger and bigger, and one day I reached up just to kind of see how bad it was, and I could tell that the drywall was disintegrating underneath. So I poked a hole and it started draining out, and I was kind of dealing with that, and people would sit down on the toilet downstairs and have water drip on them, which is pretty disgusting. But figured, okay, then we'll deal with the drain. Well, come about a week ago, a little over a week ago, I got sick in the midst of the pandemic, got tested, came up negative, thankfully. But it was just a cold or something, and everybody's encouraging me, okay, drink more liquids, drink more liquids, drink more liquids, get fluids in you. Well, what that does is it makes you go to the bathroom a lot. And the bathroom I used was this one. So, as it turns out, we actually had a leak under this toilet. And so that became a whole situation. Okay, well, we'll pull the toilet, we'll get a new wax ring, we'll put it in there, we'll reset the toilet. Turns out that's not it. Turns out the wood has rotted pretty badly under here. And on top of that, this ring, which is supposed to capture the bolts, is rotted really badly here and on the other side. So now I got to replace the ring, and I got to figure out what to do with the wood. So my next solution was to cut open the ceiling and try and fix the wood from underneath so I could resecure or put that other red ring that you saw. Well, I don't know how easy it's going to be to see, but there's a couple of pieces of wood up there I tried to attach. It just didn't work out. I cut some curves in the wood. That just wasn't working that well, and then I tried to secure them, but there are screws sticking down from up above, and those screws were preventing me from getting that piece of wood up. Ultimately, we made a decision. Because of all the wires and pipes and everything running through that area, it would be far safer, rather than taking a chance on hitting electrical or bursting the water supply line that's running through there. Let's replace the wood from above. What does that mean? Some of you may have already concluded this and kind of wondered why we didn't even start this way, but ultimately it means I need to pull up this tile. Now, this tile continues through the bathroom, but I think what we're going to do here, I need to chisel out the grout between the tiles so I can carefully remove the tile and try and save them. Some of you may say, well, why don't you just rip it, just take a hammer to the whole thing and rip it all up. Well, hammer is going to create a lot of banging, could actually jar something loose down below. And, if we can save the tile, let's save the tile. So ultimately, today's project is going to be chiseling out a ton of grout, probably up to the door. I'm not sure how far back I'm going to come. It depends on how sound the grout is. And realistically, the only wood I think that's rotten is going to be in the immediate vicinity of this ring. So I'll try and get enough tile up. I'm going to have to pull the baseboard just to keep it safe. Then I'm going to chisel out the grout, and then I'm going to try and carefully remove the tile. The reason I'm not just simply trying to remove the tile without removing the grout is because if I bang on one tile to try and remove it, that could transmit through the grout to the next tile, and I could end up shattering a bunch of tiles. So if I relieve all the grout first, then I can try and get the tile up. So that's basically today's project, is trying to get up what I can, get as far as I can, and yeah, so here we go with the time lapse. Okay, that removes that danger. And if you happen to be wondering what that sort of flickering thing is in the middle, that's the reflection off the swimming pool in the backyard. Anyway, so next thing is to get set up with my chiseling setup and start pulling grout. Okay, so let's see about preserving this baseboard. Okay, so that didn't come out as cleanly as I would have liked because there was a lot of caulking and what have you there. I probably could have done a better job of cutting it, but I now have it out. It's probably not a big repair, just standard quarter round and basic shoe molding. So I think I can get those without too much trouble. Now the fun part is starting to work on the grout, and what I learned over the years, or a few years back when I had a similar problem, was to use, let me see if I can find it, I'll show you what I'm talking about here, a putty knife and a hammer with a little careful control, because the putty knife is flexible and I can use it to chisel out the grout. If somebody's wondering about why not use a grout saw or a grinder, the grout saw doesn't always fit in between, and a grinder would make an ungodly amount of dust. So I'd rather do it by hand, plus the fact that the floor's gotten wet, so some of this stuff may come off reasonably easily. So I'm going to put on my safety glasses, and here we go. Okay, so I got the first few out. It was a little tricky at first, but then some of them are just kind of popping off, and you can see how dark it is down there. But it also occurs to me to possibly try and keep them in the right order. So I'm going to go get like a piece of wood or something that I can put somewhere, and I don't want to put them in the tub because the little bits of debris that come off will end up in the tub, and that's not a good thing. So ultimately I'm going to find something and I'll be back. Okay, I got a box, and I put the box in the tub so it's nearby, and I'm going to go ahead and put them in there in the same order that I pull them off, or the same order that they were on here. And I think I'm going to concentrate mostly just on the cut tiles around the actual flange. Beyond that, I think all the rest of the tiles are pretty much just hole tiles, or it'll be obvious where they go. So back to the time lapse and the music. All right, that wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been. They all came out without cracking. I'm now almost to the far end there. I'm considering what to do next, how far to go with this. Try to figure out how bad the wood really is. Maybe only come up to, pull you down here a little bit, up to the doorway here, up to about this line. Hopefully that's coming, yeah, that's in frame. So that's what I'm kind of considering, because then it would be a simple tile job from there. The hard part would be removing the plywood and putting in new plywood. The other consideration is how big a piece of plywood I'm going to need, how I'm going to nail it on down to the structure below it, and all of that. If I pull up too much tile, then it could get more difficult, but if I don't pull up enough, then I could end up damaging a bunch of tile while I'm trying to put in the plywood. So various different considerations, but I think what I'm going to do is just kind of keep exploring outward by like one tile in each direction, which would basically take me up to the wall there. So that's probably the first thing to attack. And then realistically, the more I look at it, there's only a couple of tiles to this wall over here. And I mean, I might get away with only doing a couple on this side. So what you'll see me doing is pausing from time to time to try and figure out what I'm going to do next, and then I'll come back and let you know what I've decided. Okay, that was slightly complicated, but just to sort of review the dimensions, I went downstairs and I measured from the center of the drain here, which should be roughed in 12 inches off the wall, which it is. Give or take a little, there might be an extra half an inch in there, but that's not really an issue. What I found was that the beams are running this way, at least underneath this particular part of the floor. Generally speaking, they're running this way, but I think they framed in to account for the weight of the toilet. And also to be able to run the pipe from here back to the wall and then down. So all of that said, from the center of the drain, it was 6.5 inches, which puts me right on the edge of that tile there. And from the center, it was 8.5 this direction, which puts me right in the center of this tile. So what I'm thinking here is I want to remove enough tile that I'm not endangering the tile while I'm removing the existing plywood. I also want to keep in mind that I can buy a 2 foot by 2 foot piece of plywood and fit that in, and that works out kind of nicely in that dimension, right about, so if I basically center it over the drain, and then that pretty much means that I'm coming this direction about 2 feet this way, again centered over the drain, give or take. It's going to be a little tricky trying to pull all the existing plywood out. It's probably going to splinter and all of that, but I think bottom line, I'm going to remove all of the tile on the left. I'm going to remove the tile on the right up to the last row, but leave the last row right by the tub. Unless they just happen to come loose, in which case I'll deal with that. And I know that there's already a tile in here that is cracked. I had reset that particular tile a year ago, something like that. It came loose and it was cracked, so got a little bit of adhesive and put it back down, redid the grout around it, so everything worked out nicely for that. But so basically everything on the left, everything on the right, up to that last tile, and then I'm going to come all the way forward to the door, and that should leave me enough room, I think, to work without endangering too much tile. I mean, technically I could come up one less, not up to the door. That's a consideration. But I also have to consider that I have to remove the actual wood. So maybe what I'll do is I'll do that, but I will leave the cut tiles that are underneath the doorway. Leave those alone. Yeah, I think that's a game plan. So back to the music and the time lapse. Well, that went better than expected. I thought it was going to take me a couple of days to do this. It's not even lunchtime yet. And I saved the last tile because I don't know how well that's going to come through. Yeah, there's a crack right in the middle of that one. That's the one that I had to fix like a year ago. I figured, why not? Let's get that one out. We can put a better looking one that doesn't have a crack like that one. And I think in total I maybe broke 2 tiles, and then there's this one. So I've got like 19 tiles remaining from the stash from when we originally did this. They tell you to save a little extra just in case, and that's our just in case, and I'm quite happy. So now I think the next step is just going to be to clean up, pick up all the debris, put the tiles somewhere. I'm going to have to clean all the tiles because the back side of the tiles are all kind of a mess. But that's a project for this afternoon or tomorrow. I'm ahead of schedule. That's a good thing. I gave myself 2 days because I thought it was going to fight me like crazy. But I got through that. So I think I get the shop back up here, vacuum up a bunch of this stuff. Then I got to kind of clean up the edges up along here, get the grout off so that when I put the new tile down, there's a gap for me to put the grout in to lock them in. So that's the plan for now. Hopefully nothing else goes horribly wrong, but I'm going to clean up, and I think that might be it for today.